welcome to InterviewPro. In this video, we're going to talk about IIFE. Have you heard about it before? Well, no problem if you didn't. We are going to talk about it in great detail. IIFE stands for Immediately Invoked Function Expression. Usually, in JavaScript, we write functions like this. I have a HTML file where I have a script1.js file. Inside this script1, I have a function with the keyword function followed by the name of the function, and inside this I have some console logs. So if I try to run this here, I don't see anything logged in the console because we need to explicitly invoke this function, right? So now if I add this line of code and save it, refresh, I see the console log here. Or we can have anonymous functions without any name here. Let me just remove this and save it. So it already started giving me an error saying identifier expected. But let me just go ahead and run it. Even here, I see an error saying function statements require a function name. So in order to run the anonymous functions, you need to assign it to a variable. So let's just call it demo, and we can make use of this demo to execute it. So this is called function expression. Now we see the output, hello. Suppose I have some code. As soon as the application starts running, I want the code to be executed, and that code will not be used anywhere else. In such cases, writing a function and invoking it explicitly in the next line looks too much work to me. We can simply write like this. So let me just remove this. Also remove the variable. Just add parentheses across the function and invoke it here. Let's save it, refresh, and I see the output. When I add the parentheses at the end of the function expression like this, instead of adding it to a variable, what happens is as soon as this code starts running, this will be executed immediately, and it will be executed only once. So this is called immediately invoked function expression. This is a function expression and we are invoking it immediately. Also, I can pass data to this IIFE. For example, assume that this function takes a parameter called greetings, and instead of console logging directly hello, I can pass the value here. Let's save it, invoke it. I'll just refresh and we see the output hello. If I say good morning, save it, refresh, I see good morning. So when exactly do we use IIFE? Suppose I have two different JavaScript files, script1 and script2, and they happen to have some variables, greetings, and also script2 has the same variable, greetings. It's possible that you have variables with same names in a large application, right? So I have console logs in the respective scripts. I expect the output from script 1 to be hello from script 1 and the output from script 2 to be hello from script 2. And I have imported these two scripts in the HTML file. Now, if I run this, I see hello from script 1, this is from script 1, and this is from script 2, which is as expected. Now, let me just tweak this code a bit. So here I will add set interval. And inside this, I keep logging the value of greetings every second. Let me just copy paste this console log here. Let's save it. If I run this, I see script 1 printing script 1 with this console log and script 2 printing this script 2 hello from script 2 message with this console log, and by this time 1 second would have completed. So this set time interval starts printing this console, and here This is coming from script 1, but the output says hello from script 2. This is because when I run the HTML, variables from all JS files will be added to the window object, which is a global object. Let's say I will say window, and if I expand it, you will see a variable called greeting added to the window object, and this is updated with the value hello from script 2. We also know that using the var keyword will allow variables to be redeclared. So greetings from script 1 and greetings from script 2 will be considered as the same variable. So any update on this variable will be global and it reflects in all scripts using this variable. This is called global namespace pollution. Using IIFEs, we can avoid this. So let me just make this code or wrap this code inside an IIFE. So function, and put this entire code inside the function. To make this function an IIFE, wrap this with parentheses and invoke it. And let's remove this extra console log. Now, if I refresh, we see this script 2 printed from script 2, and when 1 second is completed, we see this set interval getting invoked and the greeting will be printed every second. So here the variable greetings is inside this function. Every IIFE will have its own context. Variables inside this or functions defined inside an IIFE will be accessible only within this scope. Let's comment the code in script 2. Save it, come back, and try to print this greetings outside an IIFE. So if I refresh, it says greetings is not defined. Since greetings is declared inside an IIFE, it cannot be accessed outside the scope, and hence we see reference error. So in cases where you want to isolate your variables and do not want to pollute your namespace, we can use IIFE. Another important use of IIFE is to create a closure. That means you can package your code into a bundle and decide what has to be made private and what has to be publicly exposed. Let's create a small example. Let me just remove this code and I will add some code here. For example, I have a variable, or let me just create a function first. This is an anonymous function, and inside this I have a variable called count, which is initialized to 0, and I have a function called increment. This is an arrow function which will simply increment the count variable. Let me just copy paste it and create another function called decrement. It will just decrement the count variable, and this maybe a reset, or let me call it clear. This will just update the count variable to 0. Let's have another function called print, which will console log the count variable. And finally, I will have a return where I have a variable called increment. This will hold the function reference to our function increment. Since left hand side property name and property value has same name, I can simply use this as a shorthand notation. And let me add another property called decrement, another property called clear, and then print. So what I'm doing here basically is I have a function which has a variable, and the functions which do some operations on these variables. And finally, I want this function to return the references to all these functions, but I'm not exposing the count. I'm not returning the count. So let's make it an immediately invoked function and assign it to a variable, maybe count functions, so that whenever this code runs, this immediately invoked function will get executed and returns these variables. These variables, or this object, this complete object, will be stored inside count functions. So let's console log what will be the output of count functions. Save it, refresh. So this is our output. It has all the functions here, but this will not have the count variable because I am not returning the count variable. Now let's try to call these functions. So basically what we did here is we created a closure. That means we packaged all our code and we decided what needs to be exposed to the outside state or scope. So now I want to increment the count variable. So I will simply say count functions dot. Let's see if count is accessible or not. Console.log and count. I see undefined for this console log because count functions does not have a property called count. This count is only internal to this IIFE. It is not given access. I mean, count functions is not given access to this variable, and hence we see undefined. So let's try invoking those functions now. Count functions dot increment, and let's see what would be the count value after calling the increment. So we have a function called print to see the count value. So let me just refresh and we see the value as 1. Initially count is 0. When I invoked increment function, this code got executed and count value is updated to 1. And using the print, we are accessing the count property and displaying the value of count, which is 1. Let's repeat this for other functions as well. Let me just copy paste. The second time I will call decrement, and third time I'll call clear, save it and print. We see 100. Let me do one thing actually. Let me increment it twice so we see the output clearly. So first time it was 0 and it got incremented to 1. Then we called increment again, it is incremented to 2. Then we called decrement, so it is decremented by 1. And finally we cleared the input, so it is cleared to 0. Though we did not expose count to count functions, using these functions we were able to access count value. This is because of the lexical scope. Count and these functions are called within the same block. So count can be accessed by any code within this function. This is called lexical scope or static scope. The last thing that I want to show is a named IIFE. Till now we saw IIFE without any name, but now I want to give a name to my IIFE. Let's take another example to see how named IIFEs work. So let's just clear it and I will create a function without any name this time. And inside this function, we are creating a named IIFE. So this time let's give a name. And I will say REC, which means recursion. And this will take a parameter called number. Inside this function, I want to increment this number and console log the value of number. If this number value reaches 100, I simply want to return. Otherwise, I want to call this function again and again with the updated number. And finally, I am invoking this, and the initial value to this number will be 0. Let's see what happens. So we have the numbers printed from 1 to 100. Once the number value reached 100, we are simply returning it. So since this is a named IIFE, let me try to use this name outside. So let's just refresh. This function got executed, and here when it comes to this line number 8, we see an error. This is because even though my IIFE is a named IIFE, the name can be used only within the scope, not outside the IIFE. If you have any function which you want to run recursively, the IIFE which you want to run recursively, you can always give a name and use that name inside the scope but not outside the scope, because once this block of function got executed, this name will be destroyed. And one more important thing is, for example, I have a variable called value and it is assigned to 0. And in JavaScript, we know that semicolon is not mandatory. So I won't give any semicolon here. I'll just save it and call. So it gives an error saying 0 is not a function. So what happens is, if we do not provide a semicolon, the code will be while compiling, it would be converted like this, where this looks to me like a function call, right? So always make sure before making a call to your IIFE, just add a semicolon so that your code identifies that this block of code is not a function call but an IIFE. So that's all I had for today. I hope the concept is clear. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe to InterviewPro. Thank you.